Oh, my bad. Did I sweat all over your solid gold teeth? Oh, hello, squires. Welcome. This is a video that's going to be a bit about my own life, which is kind of new. There's not really much of that going on this channel, but here we go. This is the first one, taking a deep dive into some shit that I want to talk about, bruh. Woo. I can recall being quite fascinated by cartoons and how the hell did they get their voices behind the characters like that? Because, I mean, I knew early on, that's not the characters, there's obviously quite clearly a person behind it. The magic in cartoons were gone for me quite early, it looks like. And I can recall as a young, impressionable young lad trying to copy them and being bad at it because, you know, you're a child, you're not really good at much at that point. So, I have a very vague memory of going up to my father and saying, Daddy, how do they get the voices behind the characters? And he was like, they call it dubbing, I think. You know, he's a busy man. He's not really going to be worried about the trivial question about the voices behind cartoons. You know, plus, how would he know? You know, it's not exactly something he knows much about, and not something many know much about, anyways, for that matter. Now, the question obviously arose in my head, like, can someone like me even do that? Because, you know, youngster from South Africa, you know, that kind of a world seems far beyond someone like mine's reach. It's an American after all, because all the cartoons were quite clearly American cartoons, all in American accents. A magical land across the sea where shit like this happens. Not over here, not to someone like me. And that mentality is stuck throughout my life. Every single conceivable thing. Animation's fascinating. Voice acting's fascinating. Oh, that's all fascinating, but you can never possibly do it because the mindset says that how could you possibly do that? That's something reserved for better people. Unfortunately, that stuck for many, many years. So fast forward from my childhood years to my later childhood, bordering on teen years, that's when the stutter came, and the speech problems and the murmuring. Pretty much, I would speak way too fast, or if I was a bit lazy, I would just talk a bit like this, and not even bother to try and really inflect, just, you know, the effort was not there at all, not really. But for the most part, it was a stutter, which I can't really attribute it to anything in particular. I don't think it's some sort of mental issue or some sort of childhood trauma that's untreated or something. It's mostly because I think my brain works too fast, and I gotta speak really, really fast, and my mouth needs to try and keep up, and it doesn't always work. Sometimes if I really dial it back and focus on every single syllable, then I have no problem, but that's not always the case. There are still words I struggle with, like any words with S's and T's, like the word, ironically, stutter, president, and statistic. That's a hard one for me. Now, I'm not going to milk the sob story and be like, my life was really hard with the stutter. It really wasn't. It really didn't faze me all that much. Going through high school, I was quite oblivious to the pointing and the blatant, not blatant, but like, you know, subtle mockery as kids do. They weren't awful people. They were just young people. People are awful normally when they're young, I found. It was only towards, you know, later high school when shit starts to settle in and your childlike mind leaves. Mine left a bit late, granted, but still, the childlike mind leaves, and then you kind of get into this existential crisis that you're not, you're a weird dude, you know, you're 18 years old and you're still pretending DBZ and you're drawing that shit and everyone else is like getting girlfriends and you're not that cool, you're weird and nerdy. Who gives a shit? I look back on that fondly now. Back then it wasn't so great, but the stutter wasn't an issue of mine. I mean, I stuttered and I had a hard time doing, you know, speeches or orals, whatever they bloody well called in English class or whatever, but other than that, it didn't really bother me all that much. It just pretty much hindered my ability to want to become a voice actor one day, which is definitely it was a goal of mine, but only something that came to fruition or some sort of realization years after school only. But to some extent, it did kind of hinder the possibility of me coming out of my shell early on. You know, really being like, I wanted to try voice acting once, why not now? You know, those were the early years of me really coming out of it, battling with that shit. Like, am I really worth the time? That whole battle that people tend to deal with lately, or people with self-esteem issues type of thing. You know, it took a couple of years to beat the living crap out of that, beat it into the ground until it left, but I beat it into the ground and it left. I'm all the better for it, but now I had all those years wasted where I could have been owning the craft. And even at the time, I was trying YouTube at the time. I will never link you to that channel, ever. Never. But even then, figuring out speech impediment, getting over it, getting past the nasal sound, and making those nice and clear to be able to do voice acting. But back then it wasn't nearly possible, but now it's okay. I got it, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, no, I know you. Now I know you might be thinking, clearly you're speaking fine throughout the video. I mean, you're speaking fine, you're speaking quite fast and around that, but I found a way around that, my stutter issue. You see, the typical South African accent's it sounds, to the untrained ear, especially to Americans and so on, we sound kind of, at least the English-speaking ones sound kind of British to some degree. And I can see that. But for the most part, we don't, at least to us we don't, but also we don't really inflect much with our mouths. We talk quite lazily with our mouths. We don't enunciate. You see, I do very big mouth movements, and to the local populace, I do come across as moderately British, or at least I was in Britain for a while, and it affected my accent at best. But that's only because I needed a way around the problem. So the way around the problem was to over-enunciate, really get past that problem. That you see that right there, that problem, not that problem that we would normally say. So there was a way around it, and through that, I kind of beat the problem to some degree, apart from a few words like stutter and so on. But that was the remedy to my problem. See, stutter. The remedy to my problem was to get past the lazy mouth movements when speaking. So now it's like, hey, what's up, everybody? You see my mouth moves a lot to get past the problem. So now, the idea of voice acting popped into my head again a few years after school had ended. So I got myself a USB microphone. It was called a CAD U37, I think? A CAD U37 XLR cardioid USB microphone. Now, for those breaking into the game, they'll tell you, you know, a cheaper mic, but still a condenser mic, a cardioid mic is good and everything, but you would need to upgrade, which I only did many years later. So I got all the stuff together, and I went in search of free auditions, like on Casting Calls Club and whatnot, and going onto the Facebook group Voice Acting Alliance or whatever, and seeking out free roles just to get some exposure and really get my craft down. And because a basic British twang was my way around my speech impediment, I kind of had that down. Here and there I would slip up, but for the most part I had it down. But the hard part would be trying to get the American accent down, because most of the voice acting parts would be American, and that would be my biggest hurdle, because there are some words I had a real hard time with, because words, they fit differently in your mouth with different dialects. I mean, Americans don't say meter, they say meter. See, even had a hard time there saying it. Meter. Again, meter, meter, meter. The T becomes a D, and you gotta make the sound right to meter. Meter, meter, meter. It's so difficult. Water resistance up to 30 meters. You know, it's hard. It's really, really hard to still get around that. So every time I do a role, paid or otherwise, I have to take, on certain things just like that, I have to do 1,000 odd takes just to get the right one. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the point. So the irony of me wanting to becoming a voice actor and still doing voices till this day is kind of, it's kind of looking the problem in the eye and being like, yeah, I just fuck the problem, I got this. And so through the process of learning the American accent, it kind of undid the accents I was learning beforehand, because my mind was so fixated on getting these ones right that my mind kind of forgot the basic pronunciations of previous ones that I had down for years. So it's kind of like learning from the ground up all over again. It became a real problem. So the only way I got around the problem was to practice the accents on my drive to work every morning. So I'd sit there in the car. Meter, brr, meter, 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 liter, 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 meter. It became a real problem. And then you'll get it right. Oh, I got it right. And then you do it again. Like, nope. My mind can't even recall how I did it. It became a real issue, man. And it was at that point, somewhere along the line, after I did a few auditions, a few little roles here and there, it was like, honestly, at this point, what does a South African lad who's having a hard time getting the accents right with a speech impediment have to offer that Americans can do without a speech impediment and having the accent right? It's still something that you struggle with till this day, and well, at least I struggle with, and it's something that I've got to keep reminding myself that I have something to offer that others don't. And what do I have to offer? My voice is kind of strange, you see, and I give off a certain chaotic energy, so it's fantastic. Yeah. Now, with this new mindset that would waver from time to time, in all honesty, but with a new mindset of like, let me just do it. I auditioned, honestly, hundreds of times. Hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of times. I literally have a folder of just auditions. Let me actually bloody well show you. Look at all those bloody auditions. There's a lot, and some of them I even got rid of because I hated them so very much. I mean, a 10-second demo in the beginning, in the early stages of me auditioning, a 10-second demo of some demo that I wanted to do to audition for, it would take me half an hour sometimes just to get 10 seconds right, to make sure the accent was right, to make sure that things weren't sounding a bit too British in the process, which I still have a hard time doing till this day. But, yeah. Problems. No, eventually I landed some very small roles, a few lines, and like a little sideline indie animation. It was like a 5-minute animation, and I was nobody in there. I was Riker Everton in an audiobook, which, looking back, could have been much better, and I feel kind of bad for the girl that I did it for, because I could have done so much better, but my heart just wasn't in it, and my skill level just wasn't up to snuff back then. I've done a few little things here and there, a few little fan dubs for people, Final Fantasy fan dubs. I did Zell for a while, because he hasn't got a voice in game, so I had to provide a very energetic voice. Yeah, Zell, which I was fond of because I love Final Fantasy 8, bro. Eventually, I would just I'd make a little channel that I would use to do my impressions of certain characters. I will never, ever show you that, because they're bad. Some of them weren't all that bad in complete honesty, but, you know, if I redid all of them would be so much better, so I'm just not going to show you that. No. But there was still hope. For someone like me, with a stutter, with a bit of a speech impediment, and speaking way too fast, which ends up being a problem, and getting the accents down, which is still a real problem. I'm looking at you, Stanley. What? Come on. It's awesome. Also, having a pots and pans voice is not really something everybody wants to hear, in all honesty, but I'll find a way around that, no problem. You wait, you just wait, I'll find a way around that. But I harbor no ill will to anyone that might have impeded my ability to get here. Not my father, who couldn't bother to explain to me what the cartoon voices were. Sorry, Dad. You know, I was like 9 years old. It doesn't really matter. Not to any of the folks, the children, the young folk in my school that gave me a stink eye because I was a strange kid. No, it was all good. I am kind of strange. I don't even blame the depression that came into my life twice, whose ass I kicked twice. I may have done several hundred takes to get this video down. But that's voice acting with a stutter. It's called voice acting, Dad. Voice acting. Thank you all for watching, Squires. If my videos are a bit late, now you know why. Cheerio. The first mega build that I did was Bellum Garden. It was fucking terrible. And then I did Galbadia Garden, which is even larger and way more confusing for a person that